Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome. We are your hosts, Josefa Kapadia and Jasper Rivers.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 60 of Get Paid for Your Pad. My name is Jasper, I'm your host for today, and with me today is David, and David is the co-founder and CEO of Everbooked, which is a automated pricing tool for Airbnb hosts. So I'm very excited to talk to David. He's going to tell us all about what you can do with this pricing tool and how it benefits you as an Airbnb host. So David, welcome to the show.
Hey Jasper, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's early morning here in Vietnam, where I am. What about you? Where are you located?
It's late night here in Oakland, California. So
Okay.
got opposite sides of the world.
Very much. So, David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into Everbooked and all the details?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, I mean, just a quick background on me. I've been a travel guy, I dare I say, a travel nerd for quite a long time now, and really, very familiar with sort of the finer points of travel, and more recently, the finer points of yield management, which is a revenue management, which is a technique that a lot of airlines and hotels use to increase their revenue. And so, with Everbooked, I've been starting to bring some of those same technologies to folks that are running Airbnb listings or Airbnb places, and basically giving them some of the same advantages that airlines and hotels have had for quite a long time, and that I'm, for better or worse, very intimately familiar with.
That's funny. So you've traveled quite a bit throughout your life, yeah?
Yeah, no, and not only traveled, but I've traveled in style, we'll say. I'm very familiar with how to use points and miles and things like that. And so, for example, last year I flew around the world first class. I went to San Francisco, London, Johannesburg, Hong Kong, and back to San Francisco, all first class on British Airways, Cathay Pacific, and didn't pay a dime for it.
Wow.
So it's a lot of fun.
That is pretty amazing. Well, I've had the pleasure of flying first class a couple of times back in the day when I was working in finance. And I remember one time I flew from Amsterdam to Chicago, and I was just so comfortable in my bed watching movies and having nice food and drinks, and I just didn't want to leave the plane.
Yeah, it really is. These days, a lot of these first class suites, as they call them, are pretty ridiculous. Singapore Airlines, for example, gives you basically an entire room to yourself. You get a room with a bed, and they bring you champagne, and they bring you all kinds of good food and all sorts of things. And so it's it's generally reserved for the rich and famous, but it's a lot of fun, as I say, using these points and miles to be able to experience that as a mere mortal like you and I are.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's normally these first class tickets are extremely expensive, right? We're talking like 10, 15, maybe 20 times the price of a normal ticket. But with miles, the difference isn't that big, is it?
Well, with miles, you really are only, either you're not paying anything at all, or you're just paying the taxes, which generally is at most, even on an international ticket, maybe a couple $100. I think from a previous trip I did, I went down to South Africa, and so I went first class again. I went San Francisco, Hong Kong, Johannesburg, and then back Johannesburg, Hong Kong, San Francisco, and I think the total out-of-pocket expense for that was, I think, $125 each way, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
This was a few years ago. And if I just for fun, I looked, and so I went on, this was on an airline called Cathay Pacific, which is another one of the great airlines of the world. Mm-hmm. And I looked, and I said, okay, so if I was just going to buy this ticket, just pay just dollars for it, how much would it cost? And my recollection is it was about $32,000.
Oh, my God. That's insane.
$250 was little better.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And the way you did this was by collecting a lot of miles on credit cards, correct?
Yeah, you collect a lot of miles on credit cards mainly, and there's, we could probably spend an entire hour just on this topic alone. But there's all kinds of different ways that you can do that. So you can, get these credit cards that have these large sign-up bonuses, and they'll give you, 70,000 miles on some airline or 50,000 miles on some airline. And so as long as you meet like a minimum spend, and so if you do several of these things, you got to be careful with your credit rating and things like that. But if you do several of these things, you can rack up a lot of miles fairly quickly. Not to mention miles you can actually rack up just by spending your own money on the credit card for everyday expenses.
Right. Great. Well, let's. We can, like you said, we can probably talk about an hour about this, but that's not the purpose of the show. So let's get into Airbnb. How did you find out about Airbnb?
Well, so so one of the other trips I took, done quite a few of these. One of the other trips I took, I did another first class thing, and I went the other way around the world. And I went San Francisco, London, Singapore, Sydney, Australia, and this was several years ago. This was around New Year's 2000, and I was going down with my family actually, and we were going to go down for and celebrate the millennium in Sydney, Australia. And we were, of course, it's New Year's in Sydney, right? And the Millennium New Year's in Sydney. Things are fairly booked, and so all the hotels were booked. And we started looking around, and we found a site that is actually a competitor to Airbnb, because Airbnb didn't exist back then. Mm-hmm. It's called Vacation Rental by Owner, VRBO. Mm-hmm. And they had a listing in Sydney for it was a penthouse apartment, and I don't remember the building. It was one of the big downtown skyscrapers down in the Central Business District in Sydney, Australia, for New Year's Eve. And I don't remember exactly how much it cost, but my recollection was it was like $125 or $150 US dollars a night for this 2-story penthouse apartment on the top of this building in the Central Business District. And I sort of said, this seems like a better way to travel than staying in a small room at the Hilton. Yeah. And so that was my sort of first introduction to the concept of vacation rentals in general. And of course, as I'm sure you know, Jasper, as Airbnb has come on the scene here in the last few years and made quite an inroad in the vacation rental market, and really made really opened up some new frontiers, new avenues with with the private rooms and the shared rooms and things like that, things that some of the other vacation rental sites didn't even offer. Mm-hmm. And so, sort of became familiar with vacation rentals back then, and then became familiar with Airbnb, as they sort of burst on the scene. And really, since then I've had a lot of really great experiences meeting hosts and talking to folks. I personally think you get a far more natural experience with Airbnb than you do staying in a hotel. Just the local flavor that, maybe a concierge at a hotel could give you a little of, but you really get that when you're having drinks with a host, right. In some foreign land. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Because my experience with concierges at hotels is actually not that great. And I've traveled full time pretty much for the last 5 years. So I've stayed in 1 or 2 hotels, and in certain places I feel like they just refer you to a place where they get commission, or sometimes they just have no clue. It's pretty shocking how badly these concierges are informed.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And so we've had some of the most my wife and I have had some of the most amazing travel experiences. Even just in the last few years with Airbnb. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so what about Everbooked? How did you get involved with that?
Well, so I was starting to talk a little bit earlier about the yield management and the revenue management that these airlines and hotels do, and so how they price their services. And you'll see this with, as I say, with both airlines and hotels, but you'll see some really interesting things. For example, on the airline side, a flight from San Francisco to New York might be more expensive than a flight from Monterey, California, which for those of you that don't know the Bay Area, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive south of San Francisco. So Monterey, California to San Francisco to New York on the same plane, San Francisco to New York, same flight. Right. It might be less expensive to add that extra flight on.
Yeah.
And same thing with hotels, where you'll get some really interesting sort of pricing dynamics, and it's all because they're running these yield management or revenue management systems. They basically figure out, like in that airline example, they figure out, well, there's more demand. There's a customer who will pay a higher price to go from San Francisco to New York than there is a customer who will go from Monterey to San Francisco to New York. So we'll actually charge a higher price for the same seat.
Right.
Hotels do exactly the same thing with, and base a lot of their information based on events and based on seasonal trends and things like that. So, they know that if there's it's a rainy Tuesday in Portland, Oregon, say in November, nothing's in town. They know that there's just not a lot of demand, and they'll lower their price. Conversely, if it's the same Tuesday except it's in July, and maybe it's July 4th or something in Portland. They know that there's a lot of demand because, for those of you that are don't know, Portland is absolutely gorgeous in the summertime. Not quite as gorgeous rest of the year. So they'll raise their prices. The hotels will raise their prices in Portland in the summertime because of the 4th of July, because of maybe a conference or an event that's in town, just because of the fact it's summer and it's beautiful.
And do you have a background in this? Like, did you used to work for airlines or hotel or?
I've got a financial modeling background, so not specifically with airlines and hotels, but I'm very familiar with how a lot of these models and things like that are put together. Mm-hmm. And so I've got that sort of that technical background, and I am an engineer as well. So that's it's one of the fun things for me is that not only am I CEO of the company and get to sort of see the big picture and understand how all that works. I'm also an engineer, and I can also sort of understand a lot of the nitty gritty stuff.
Right.
So to answer your original question, though, so what I try to do, or what I realized, is that these airlines and these hotels are doing this revenue management. They're increasing their revenue by charging different prices on different nights or different prices for different flights. And the vacation rental market and Airbnb hosts really are not. Most Airbnb hosts, something like 85% of them, from what we've found, 85% of them charge just a single price each night.
Yeah.
Then there's some that maybe they've got a summer rate and a winter rate, or they've got maybe a weekend. They boost things on weekends a little bit, but it's like 2 or 3 prices, and only a very small fraction are doing any kind of more sort of hotel-like or airline-like pricing.
Right.
Most people are just flat prices.
Yeah, and I think of all the different aspects that you have to master to be a successful Airbnb host, I think pricing is the number one thing that people have trouble with, because it's not that easy, right? I mean, how do you know what the best price is? And I think a lot of people set one price because they just don't really know how to do it differently.
Well, and it's really hard, and it's really hard for 2 reasons. One is that you got to figure out, in order to figure out your best price, just your best price overall, you've got to figure out what your competition is doing and look at that and understand sort of what a lot of folks that are competing with you, what other Airbnb hosts or other vacation rental hosts are doing. You got to figure that out, and then ideally, anyway, you've got to sort of monitor things on a very ongoing basis. So as things get booked up, as availability changes in your listing, or availability even changes on other listings,
right.
you have to react to that. Exactly. As events are announced and things like that, you've got to react to that and raise your price or lower your price based on that. You've got to react to the seasons. You've got to react to, if you really want to get fancy with it, you can even start to react to things like weather patterns and things like that. Sunny weekend coming up, raise your price a little bit.
Very smart, yeah. And we talk about this in our book quite a lot, because I think with pricing, your listing right, you can really improve your results a lot. And but there's only so much you can do as just an individual person. Like myself, I have an econometrics background, so I'm pretty good with math and statistics and stuff. But still, I can't spend the whole day trying to monitor and calculate. So, all I can do is, I set different prices for the weekends versus the weekdays. Have seasonality in my pricing. I look at special events. But that's pretty much as far as you can go as an individual without it becoming a full-time job.
Well, exactly, yeah, and even that what you're doing is already more than what a lot of people do, and even that, as you say, even that is it's definitely a step beyond the basics. But even that's not ideal because I would guess anyway, you're probably not doing it every single day, looking at the prices every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, constantly monitoring all of your listing, all your competition's listing, what area hotels are doing, all that sort of stuff. It's just too much work for any, at least anyone that has a life outside of
right, exactly,
outside of managing their Airbnb listing.
And it's a lot of work, and also it's hard to measure the effects as well, because you can't. In an ideal world, you have two worlds and two Airbnb listings, and then in one, you use one strategy, and the other one you use a different strategy, and at least you can see what works best. But so with one listing, you're also not completely sure if what you're doing, all this time and effort that you're putting in, if it's actually like bringing you like much better results or not.
Yeah, and so what it ends up being is a perfect job for a computer, and that's why if you look back at history at the airlines and the hotels when they first brought their revenue management systems into play, it was in the 70s and the 80s, right when computers started to become a little bit more mainstream. Certainly there were still mainframes and things like that, but they became a little bit more mainstream. It's because computers can do this job, and as I say, unless you have no life other than managing your Airbnb listing, a human can't really do this job or can't do it as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's the service that we're trying to bring to people is basically an automated pricing service. What you do is you sign up for our product, and we look at the market for you. We look at the competing Airbnbs, we look at competing hotels, we look at seasonality trends, we look at all kinds of crazy data down to like FAA passenger employment and deployment data at the local airport. We look at all this data, and we sort of synergize and collate it all, and end up coming up with a single nightly price for every night. So, tomorrow night we might say, your place, you should rent it for $72. The night after that, you should rent it for $85. The night after that, you should rent it for $105. And then the night after, you should rent it for $90. Whatever the model says. But we come up with that single unified price or set of prices for each night that you have coming up for the next several months. Mm-hmm. And then we connect with Airbnb, and we actually set those prices in Airbnb. So essentially, it's a completely hands-off pricing system. You sign up, you let us set all your prices for you, and bottom line, you make more money at the end of the day.
So let's talk about how it works. Let's say I want to use it, and all I need to do is I sign up, and then Everbooked connects to my calendar, and that's all I need to do. Is there any sort of input from my side?
There's not a lot of input, no. So really, all you need to do is you sign up, and you connect it up to your Airbnb calendar, and you can import, if you have more than one listing, you can import either just a single listing if you just want to test it out, or you can import all your listings if you're ready to go ahead with it. Mm-hmm. And you hit go, and it updates your prices and just continually does that. We update 4 times a day. So every 6 hours or so, we'll go through and relook at the local market and relook at all the competing Airbnbs and relook at everything, and then go and update your prices. Now they don't always change every 6 hours, but at least we're looking at it every 6 hours to make sure we've got sort of the most current data. And it really is a pretty set it and forget it type of system. And as I say, at the end of the day, what it does is it increases your revenue. We've seen revenue increases as much as 40% for some of our clients that are using our system already. Mm-hmm. And that's at least in my mind, that's a pretty significant increase for something that you just sort of have to turn on.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's not even just the revenue increase, but it also saves you time, right? You don't have to go into your calendar every day, update it, look at the prices, and figure things out.
Well, not only does it save you time, it actually also helps you get more bookings, which leads to more reviews and leads to a better rating or ranking on Airbnb. Because if you imagine what we're doing is we're both raising and lowering prices, so we're trying to raise it on nights when there's really high demand, maybe there's a conference in town or something like that. But we're also lowering it, like that night I mentioned earlier, the rainy November Tuesday night in Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. We're lowering the prices on nights like that, just like hotels are. And so what it means is that you're going to be able to capture a booking. There's still a few people coming to town that night. You're going to be able to capture a booking that maybe your competition or that someone down the street wouldn't be able to capture. And capturing that booking means that you get an extra review from an extra guest, and that, as I say, increases your search rank and things like that on Airbnb.
Absolutely. Getting bookings is, probably the most important thing of running your listing. And an empty house is, doesn't bring in any money and doesn't bring in any reviews, any word of mouth advertising. So it's always better to have somebody pay something than to just have your house stay empty.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
One question I have for you, David, is what about the base price? Do you guys set the base price and then vary the pricing around that price, or does the host still have to set that themselves?
So we're right now in the process of building some tools that will help our hosts do that. Right now, the host usually does it in consultation with us. So when you become a customer, it allows you to go in and set your base price automatically if you want, but we send an email to you usually within a few hours of you signing up just to check in and make sure everything's okay. And some of our hosts will set a base price in consultation with us. We're in the process, as I say, of building tools though that will make that 100% completely automatic.
Okay, very cool. So it's basically a pretty hands-off system. What if people want to override a price? Let's say my cousin is staying in my house and I want to give him a discount. So instead of your optimized pricing, I want to just put in some sort of price that I agreed on.
Yeah, so we do have the ability to do that. So if you log into your Everbooked account, you'll see a calendar with all your prices, and it's just this week, next week, the week after, and so on and so forth, with each price set on each day. And it actually also, interestingly, it has this neat little map that allows you to see sort of why the price has been increased or decreased. But one of the options on there is an override ability. You click the price and you say, I'd rather have $10 a night. You said your cousin's coming. How much do you like him? But I'd rather have $10 a night or whatever number you want, and you can override your price. Mm-hmm. And you can also, when you're doing that, you can also set a minimum price. So if you want to say, hey, I'm willing to vary my price up and down, but if there's a really bad night that Tuesday in November in Portland, really bad night, I don't want to go below whatever the number is, $70 a night or something like that. It's not worth it to me to have a guest for less than $70 a night. You can set that. You can set basically a minimum price, and then our system will go in and reduce your listing down to the minimum price if it thinks that that's the appropriate thing to do on that night, but it won't go below the minimum price, even if it otherwise would have.
Do you also have a maximum price?
We do, yeah. So some of our hosts have told us that they want to basically be careful not to, in their mind, I guess, overcharge or charge some really exorbitant rate, even if, say, there's a conference or something in town, there's a lot of demand. And so we do allow hosts to set both a minimum and a maximum price. And again, just works just like the minimum price, where if the price would otherwise be higher, we set it, or we cut it off and cap it at that maximum price.
Mm-hmm. And what are the results so far? Is it working well? You mentioned earlier that some people make up to 40% extra. Is that? I'm assuming that's not the case for everybody, but what's sort of like more of an average improvement?
Well, it's the case for a lot of folks. I mean, we're seeing generally anywhere from 20 to 40% extra for a host that hasn't been doing any dynamic pricing in the past. So that's a host that has just a single flat static price. They're charging whatever it is, $100 a night, whatever the number is. They're charging a flat rate every night of the year. We see anywhere from 20 to 40% increase. In one or two cases, we've actually seen more. For folks that have been doing some sort of limited dynamic pricing, like maybe they're raising their rates on weekends and not raising it on weeknights, we're still seeing pretty good improvements. It's a little less than the 20-40%, but it's still right up there. Right.
That's pretty incredible. That's a lot of money, especially if you're doing it full time.
It's a lot of money if you're doing it full time, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I'd love to use it. My listing is in Amsterdam. I don't think you guys are outside of the U.S. yet. Is that right?
Yeah. So right now we focused on the U.S. and we're in 2,500 cities in the U.S. right now. most of the major metro areas. So, I mean, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, Denver, Las Vegas, quite a few others as well. We're in most of the major metro areas in the United States. We unfortunately have not yet hit Amsterdam, but that's coming soon.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to that. What's coming up on your end? Are you expanding internationally like pretty quickly over the next few months or years, or?
Yeah, well, so I think there's a couple big things that we're working on right now that we're pretty excited about. One certainly is a continued expansion. I mean, we've really been able to start to bring new cities that we support online very quickly. If you imagine, it's a fairly complex process to bring a new city online, because we have to collect a whole bunch of data about the city, from what seasonality and what those types of trends are, to what area hotels are doing, what all the other Airbnbs in the city are doing. So it's a fairly complex process to bring a new city online. We've really got that process down so that we're expanding extremely quickly right now. So both bringing online more U.S. cities as well as expanding internationally and hitting some of the top markets in Europe and Asia. Very excited about that. Also very excited about some of the tools that I mentioned or alluded to a minute ago around helping hosts understand what their competition looks like and understand what their base price should be. We're working on a lot of stuff there, so that's pretty exciting. And then we're working a lot to improve our algorithm. It's one of those things where we've already seen, as I say, 20 to 40% improvement for a lot of hosts, but we think it can get even better. And so for folks that sign up now, they'll only benefit from that improved algorithm as we continue to roll it out over the next couple of months. So lots of stuff going on.
Awesome. That's very exciting. I know there's a number of companies that either have pricing tools or help Airbnb hosts improve their pricing. What would you say is special about Everbooked? Like, why is Everbooked the best pricing algorithm?
Well, I think our real strength really is our technology. We look at more data than really any of our competitors do, and you can imagine that if you have more data to look at, you can create a better algorithm, and you can thus increase revenue more than any of the competitors. So I think really our secret sauce really is in the amount of data we collect, the amount of information we look at, and the algorithm, the what we do with that data to actually set a price. That's that in my mind puts us far and away, above our competition.
Right. And talking about the algorithm, without getting too technical, could you just give us a bit of a summary of what are the things that you look at? Like, what are the most important factors involved in calculating these prices?
Well, there's quite a few, and I could probably spend an hour on this topic alone. But I'll try to give you at least a high level, Jasper. I guess at the sort of at a very base level, we look at things like seasonality. So that's how many people are needing to travel or wanting to travel on any given week of the year. You can imagine that, again, if we take Portland, Oregon as an example, absolutely gorgeous during the summer, extremely high demand during the summer, very low demand during the winter. And so if you go to Portland in October or November or December, very, very low demand. Whereas if you go to Portland in July or August, it's very, very high demand. So we look at seasonality. We look at day-of-week trends, and we do that on sort of a quote-unquote hyper-local level. So if you imagine, say, a beach town like Santa Monica, California, it's down by L.A., good demand every day of the week, but especially good demand for folks that are going there on the weekend. Conversely, if you look at a sort of more of a business town like San Jose, California, which is here in the Bay Area, it's just about an hour south of us here in Oakland. It's a business town. There's really not a lot to do there on the weekends, but there's a lot of travelers that come in to go to companies like Adobe Systems and folks like that. So the demand is much higher on the weekday than it is on the weekend. So we look at seasonality. We look at day-of-week trends. We look at what we call a distressed inventory or immediacy factor. So if your place hasn't booked and it's coming the night in question is coming soon, we like to try to discount it a little bit to say, hey, you know what, last minute deal, let's get somebody in here. Even though we haven't booked it, let's get somebody in here at a lower price than better to do that than not get somebody in at all. We also look a lot at events. So, what events are going on in town? Is there a big concert? Is there a big corporate conference, things like that, anything in town? And actually ask me about that later, Jess, because there's some interesting things on events I want to tell you about. And then we look at the competition as well. So we look at hotels and we look at other Airbnbs. If the other Airbnbs around your Airbnb are getting booked up, odds are that somebody's going to be willing to pay a slightly higher price for your place because it's one of the last ones left in the area that they're looking at. Conversely, if other Airbnbs are all available, somebody might want to pay a slightly lower price for your place, or you attract them with a slightly lower price because there's lots and lots and lots of choices in your immediate neighborhood. So lots of different factors that we look at.
Yeah, and that's the reason why it's so hard to do this without having an algorithm and a computer at hand. You mentioned something about special events.
Well, events is one of the most interesting ones to me because you sort of think, okay, so there's an event in town, you should raise your prices. Uh-huh. But it turns out that that's not actually necessarily true. What you really need to look at is there an event in town that's going to bring travelers from out of town into your city? Mm-hmm. And only then should you raise your prices. And so there's a lot of events that happen here in San Francisco and LA and New York and I think most major cities in the world, which really are sort of locally focused events. So they're big. You get a lot of people coming into town for them, but they're folks from other nearby cities, maybe folks from the suburbs, or folks that can drive home and mm-hmm. They live an hour away and they can drive home at night. Right. And so they don't need an Airbnb. And so even though these are huge, massive, well-known events, they hardly affect pricing at all. Then there's other events that maybe a major sporting event, like in the U.S. here, the Super Bowl, something like that, where folks are coming into town. A lot of folks are coming into town from some foreign city, and so those events do hugely impact pricing. And one of the key things that we figure out is which events are the ones that impact pricing and bring a lot of people in from out of town, and which events are the ones that are really just local events that are big but they don't matter from a pricing standpoint. Right.
And how do you figure that out? Like you look at the statistics from the events give you, or?
Well, that's part of the secret sauce. But what we do is we look at a number of different factors from events. So things like if it's a recurring event, which a lot of them are. What happened last year? Right? What happened to hotel prices, or what happened to Airbnb prices last year?
Right.
Did they go up at the time of this event?
Uh-huh.
We look at event popularity and things like that. There's some social factors and things like that we can look at. So how many people are talking about this event, where are those people based, those sorts of things, and using a lot of factors like that, we can get a pretty good gauge on whether or not the event is going to be an event that's going to bring people into town, or an event that's just sort of a local, big but local event.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about the costs. Like how much does it cost to have your service?
Well, we try to take a pretty simple pricing model. So we're charging 1% of gross earnings after your free trial. And I believe we've arranged a special deal, Jesper, for some of your podcast listeners on the free trial. We can talk about that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But once the free trial is over, we charge 1% of your gross earnings. So essentially just 1% right off the top. But keep in mind, you're making 10 to 40% more. So there's a significant increase in your revenue, and we're just taking a little piece of that.
Yeah, that sounds like a no-brainer to me.
In my mind, it is.
And okay, so I think normally people get 30 days free, and there's no other costs. It's just a 1%. Yeah, no sign-up costs or something like that.
No, there's no sign-up costs. As I say, it really just takes a couple of minutes of your time, and just 1%, and then that's it. So we like to keep it pretty simple.
Very cool. And you mentioned that we have a special offer for our listeners. So normally you get 30 days free, but if you sign up with our special promotion code GPFYP, which stands for Get Paid for Your Pad, you will get 90 days for free. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So for your podcast listeners only, if you guys sign up for the Everbooked service with the Get Paid for Your Pad code, again GPFYP, then you'll get a 90-day free trial rather than a 30-day free trial. So it gives you 3 months to give it a go. Don't have to pay us anything, and you'll, as I say, you'll definitely see an increase in earnings. So we're very, very optimistic. You want to keep it around, but you get 90 days to make that decision.
Awesome. I like that because then there's really no risk, and especially because you're always in control, right? You can set overrides, so you don't have to be completely reliant on the algorithm if you don't want to. So there's really no risk of trying it out, I would say.
Well, and not only that, I mean, we certainly don't think you want to, but if you wanted to, you certainly can turn it off and on. So if you sign up and you want to try it out, and then you decide for whatever reason that you don't like it, you can turn it off.
Okay.
Again, not many people do that. We don't think you'd want to, but we give you the option if that's if that's something you do want to do.
Awesome. So for those who do want to try this out, you can go to Everbooked.com. That's EVERBOOKED, Everbooked, and use the promotion code GPFYP, and you'll get your 90-day free trial. I'll also put these details in the show notes that you can find at getpaidforyourpad.com, as always. So, David, thank you so much for your time. It's been a really interesting talk.
Well, likewise, Jasper. And one other thing I wanted to mention to your listeners too. So as I say, we're in at the time of this podcast anyway, 2,544 cities in the U.S., but we're releasing more almost every day. And so if you visit our website, if you want to check whether or not we're in your area, you can click on the cities tab on our website, and it'll let you search for your city. If we're not, I'd still encourage you to go ahead and sign up. What we'll do is we'll notify you when we get to your city, and so you'll be able to turn it on as soon as we're there. But we're in a lot of cities already.
Very, very cool. Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure. And for all the listeners, if you want to know more about Airbnb hosting, you can, of course, download our book on Amazon.com. Just search for Airbnb, and it should be the first book to show up. And also, there's a bunch of free resources that you can get at getpaidforyourpad.com as well. You can get the audio book. You can get first couple of chapters for free. So go ahead and check that out. There's also a bunch of good articles on the site. And of course, every week there will be a new episode with interesting guests from all over the world. So with that, I'm finishing up this episode. David, thank you very much for your time. And everybody out there, we'll see you next time.
Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad. Get paid for your pad.